Navage helps treat congestion symptoms in seconds flat, without drugs. This New Year's, resolve to use drug-free Navage to help you breathe easier, sleep better, and feel healthier all year long. Ask for Navage at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Target, or find us online at Navage.com. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E. Clean nose, healthy life.
Derek Overstreet, founder of the New Millennium Group. We're a financial planning firm. Listen, we're fiduciaries. We have advisors standing by right now to take your call. That's 888-999-6370. 888-999-6370. The reason you're going to want to call is we're going to help you retire 3 to 5 years before you thought possible. Now, imagine how that would be if you could actually retire 3 to 5 years sooner than your plan was. The way we do this is by putting together a step-by-step plan, taking into consideration any rental properties that you have, any pension income that you have, your Social Security. Listen, we put that all together for you in writing. It will allow us to build your income based on inflation. You know, inflation has been rapidly rising. You and I both need a plan that whatever we start out our income at, in 5 or 10 years, we're going to need 40% more income. So if you're one of those people listening and you'd like a plan in writing, give us a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370, or go to utahsfinancialplanner.com.
There are so many things that set Euromax cabinets apart from any other cabinet provider. The details can be a bit overwhelming, but let me give you a small sample. Each of their boxes are made from laminate with high-strength pressed wood core. They band all 4 edges of each piece using a waterproof and heat-resistant PUR glue that's the best in the industry. Their process virtually eliminates water damage, chipping, and greatly extends the life of your investment. Their LED lights are inset flush, so they look amazing wherever you put them. Whether it's inside glass cabinets, under the wall cabinets, or in the toe kicks, nothing adds a more luxurious feeling than lighting done correctly. When it comes to the face of your cabinets, the sky's the limit. They have access to all the cutting-edge products in the market. Simply put, the finest cabinet to be built and installed in the state of Utah. Go see their showroom in Pleasant Grove or start shopping their product at EuromaxFurniture.com. That's EuromaxFurniture.com. Euromax, built for you.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair. Save up to 20 cents with DinoPay. Here's Ricky Meese.
Snowplows are out again in Parley's Canyon, taking another swipe at I-80. And the plows are 4 plows wide. And that's why you're going to see, in addition to the snow, slower speeds either direction of I-80, mostly between Lambs Canyon and Kimball Junction in the Valley. Salt Lake County freeways in good shape. We've had some snowfall along parts of I-15 in Davis County, but Little Cottonwood Canyon is closed for avalanche control at this time. They are hoping to have it open by 2:30, 3 o'clock, and we will keep you posted. Don't miss the amazing Utah Auto Expo, January 12th through 15th at the Mountain America Exposition Center. See the newest cars, trucks, electric vehicles, all in a non-selling environment. AutoExpoUtah.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Our KSL weather, we'll see dry and cold weather till this evening. Then another snow squall moves through the Wasatch Front during the afternoon commute. Another couple inches of snow is likely to come with it. We could see snow showers again tomorrow morning before things clear up. And right now, we're at 32 degrees with a snow shower. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
2 days ago, a campaign speech from President Joe Biden made big headlines. He stood at the pulpit at the Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina. President Biden is far from the first politician to stir the strident elixir of scriptural sermon and polarized politics in a church setting. But beyond the headline of a purely political presidential speech are far bigger questions and far greater consequences of what happens when we deify American politics and politicize the nation's places of worship. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
I have to tell you, I was rooting for President Biden on Monday. And I have rooted for him in the past. I rooted for him at Valley Forge. I rooted for him in a speech that he was delivering at Freedom Hall in Philadelphia. I praised his words when he spoke of freedom in Poland. Monday, I was deeply disappointed. And it had nothing to do with Democrats versus Republicans or liberals versus conservatives or red versus blue. It was over a principle. And the principle is this idea of deified politics and politicized faith spaces. And that worries me. So regardless of your faith tradition and regardless of your political persuasion, the principle is what matters here. So let's start with President Biden and what actually did take place at the Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina on Monday. President Biden blended scripture and electoral politics during his speech at the church. At a few points, he made the connection between MAGA Republicans and former President Donald Trump going against both American and Christian principles.
We shall know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. But the truth is under assault in America. An extreme movement in America, the MAGA Republicans, led by a defeated president, is trying to steal history now. They tried to steal an election. Now they're trying to steal history, telling us that violent mob was, and I quote, a peaceful protest. That's not America. In America, we witness to serve all those who, in fact, participate. And losers are taught to concede when they lose. And he's a loser.
So you get the tone and tenor of where President Biden went. Again, it was deeply disappointing to me. Again, I don't care your political persuasion. I don't care your faith tradition. That's not what this is about. But the president standing at a pulpit in a faith space delivered an angry at times, a frustrated politically at times, with a little sprinkling in of a few scriptures, on clearly a partisan line. Anytime you're at a pulpit and you got to use a pejorative to describe somebody else, even someone that you disagree with, even someone you dislike, even someone you might even have some feelings of hate toward, you're standing in the wrong space. And let me show you what I mean by that. And we're actually going to go to President Barack Obama, who stood at that very same pulpit years ago and delivered a speech. He also relied on scripture. He also acknowledged the anger and frustration of the nation in terms of things that had gone on. Of course, the tragedy that occurred in that very church with 9 black churchgoers murdered by a white supremacist. But listen to the way President Obama went about it versus the way President Biden went about his message on Monday.
An act that he presumed would deepen divisions that trace back to our nation's original sin. Oh, but God works in mysterious ways. God has different ideas. He didn't know he was being used by God. Blinded by hatred, the alleged killer could not see the grace surrounding Reverend Pinckney and that Bible study group. The light of love that shone as they opened the church doors and invited a stranger to join in their prayer circle.
And again, I don't care whether you loved President Obama as your president or not. That was not the issue of the day. It's the principle of what he did and how he did it. The tone, the tenor, it matters. The words have meaning, the meaning matters. And so the president was able to call out hate. He was able to call out white supremacy. He was able to mourn with those that were mourning. He was able to rally those even to some cheers and applause because he was focused on a principle and a set of principles. And that was exactly the opposite of what President Biden did on Monday at that very same church, at that very same pulpit in South Carolina. And so the question that it should lead all of us to is, what is it that we're doing in this country that is leading us to this idea that we have to deify our politics and our politicians? Doesn't matter their persuasion, Doesn't matter whether they fit on the right or left side of the aisle, red or blue. But we have made this case that our politics are the religion of the country. We have made it so that if we have a political disagreement with someone, they're not just wrong, they're wrong and they're evil. And we've taken many of our sacred spaces in this country and turned them into political rallies. In fact, it was interesting on Monday that in the midst of the president's political rally inside of a church, a protest also erupted, which further ignited the political rally. Take a listen.
You should honor the life of the call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
Thank you. Thank you.
So you had pro-Palestinian protesters interrupting the President of the United States, standing at a pulpit in a church to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. And again, that's their right. They can do that. But it's interesting to me that the reaction was not the reaction that you heard when President Obama spoke at that same pulpit years earlier. The reaction was to turn it into a political chant of 4 more years. And so that's where we have to step back and start asking ourselves the harder questions, the deeper questions, the look in the mirror kind of questions. Have we allowed our politics in this country to become the religion? Have we so deified how important it is for a Democrat or a Republican to be the president or to have control of the Congress or to be in control of our local government that it takes on a faith quality to it? Are we so determined to demonize those that we disagree with that we can no longer go into a house of worship and worship? And whether you're walking into a church or a chapel, a synagogue or a mosque, do we have to be worried about how we voted in the last election or our view about a particular policy issue? Really interesting. Samuel Benson, who we had on the program earlier this week, had a great piece at Deseret.com today, also talking about President Biden's speech and the fact that Nikki Haley had criticized the president for delivering that kind of speech in that setting in a church she had been in, by the way. She was governor when that tragedy occurred at Mother Emanuel Church, and so was very critical of that. But it was interesting, in Sam Benson's piece, he talked about a quote from Tim Alberta, staff writer at The Atlantic, who said that the entire scene with the president on Monday was wrong. He said, no matter the tradition, no matter the denomination, no matter the partisan flavor, it was wrong. The standard should be the same. And what he was really saying is we've got to stop using faith spaces as a place for a political prop. And left and right have done that over the years, no question about it. But the question is, if we get this backwards, if we end up forever stuck in deifying our politics and our politicians, and if we're forever violating our sacred spaces with politics, we lose in the end. Individually, collectively, as a community, and as a country. That's something to think about today. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. 6 days until Utah lawmakers are back on the Hill.
Making decisions that affect you.
Fewer taxes taken out of paychecks.
Tax credits for families. Affordable housing. And school funding.
This week, KSL tells you everything you need to know about the upcoming session. Wednesday, school safety and curriculum. Thursday, AI and technology. Friday, anything affecting taxes and your money. Listen this week, Eye on the Hill 2024.
On KSL News Radio.
Are you tired of being sluggish and tired and not having your clothes fit the way you want? No more what if. No more woulda, coulda, shoulda. Just Get it done. And the way to get it done is with SOTA Weight Loss. SOTA stands for state-of-the-art weight loss because it is state-of-the-art. You don't do it alone. You've got your own coach and nutritionist to help you along the way. You have a question, you just send them a quick text, instant response. You know exactly what to do to get on path to the best you that you can possibly be. And right now, I got to tell you, an extraordinary opportunity. All you have to do is send an email to shapeup@sotaweightloss.com. You could win a full year of the SOTA Weight Loss program and a $2,000 wardrobe makeover, which you will need as a result because the results don't lie. SOTA simply works. I lost 37 pounds in just 90 days. I'm 2 years in. I still feel great. You can do the same. Check it out at sotaweightloss.com, SOTA weightloss.com. Enter today, shapeup@sotaweightloss.com. You could win and win big.
If you're on the journey of building your dream home, remodeling, or just want to brighten up some rooms, let the Blind Man be your tour guide into the possibilities 2024 has to offer. Window coverings balance functionality and aesthetics by managing light and privacy effortlessly. Whether you seek a captivating design element, enhanced privacy, light-blocking solutions, or an infusion of natural light, the Blind Man's consultants are here to navigate you through the latest trends, tailoring them to complement your unique style. Motorized and automated roller shades have emerged as the preferred choice in 2024. This is driven by features such as the convenience they provide for hard-to-reach windows, providing safety for both children and pets, and contributing to energy efficiency. The Blind Man's experts would love to help you explore the options along your journey. Visit theblindman.com today to set up a free in-home consultation. Theblindman.com.
From Ogden to St. George, Utah's premier window covering provider, The Blind Man.
They say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. You may not have that kind of time for weatherization, energy efficiency, and appliance rebates, but we do. Dominion Energy's ThermWise program has experts who know where and how to save money. They help homeowners and businesses find simple ways to conserve natural gas and rebates through upgrades that may help to save even more. We put our energy into helping you conserve it, so you can spend your 10,000 hours becoming an expert in what matters to you. Start with a home energy plan at thermwise.com.
Healthcare with human kindness is here. It's at Common Spirit Health. Hospitals, clinics, and caregivers all connected to advance healthcare in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Together, we have a common purpose, partnering with you in health and healing using powerful medicine, powerful technology, and the greatest power of all, human kindness. You'll know it when you see it, because human kindness is in every care site and in every caregiver. Common Spirit Health. Hello, human kindness.
When you hire your local CertaPro painters, you get
the power of a cut above.
Decades of expertise to transform your home. From so-so to virtuoso.
The power of neighborhood painters.
We live where you live and probably like the same pizza place you do. Put
the power of pro
to work for you today. Get your project started at CertaPro.com.
Each CertaPro painter's business is independently owned and operated.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, using less salt on the road, better on your wallet and the environment. Second, Salt Lake County employees getting a wage increase. And third, the ex-husband of Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, accused of a weapons violation, harassment, and assault, was arrested this week. Right now, 32 degrees with a snow shower in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, often as we look at conversations around welfare system programs, we often hit the wall pretty quickly as it goes to left, right, red, blue, Democrat, Republican, going to the extremes. One side points to $34 trillion of national debt and personal responsibility. The other highlights skyrocketing costs of living, social safety net, and all of those things. And we want to get past all of the headline components to that and get underneath it just a little bit. There is a role for government to play, and if government is going to play a role, they should do it incredibly well, and it should produce the right results. And so to ask and answer some of those policy questions in terms of what's really going on and why, Really pleased to have joining us for the first time on the show, Sophia Hamilton. She's a social mobility fellow with Young Voices. That's a nonprofit organization, highlights and promotes contributions of young writers. And Sophia, a great piece in Reason.com, talking about welfare being great, but not necessarily for the right people. Tell us about that.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today, Boyd, and I'm glad that you liked the piece. So for my article in Reason, I had looked into the welfare system, particularly in Washington, D.C., and looked at welfare benefit cliffs, which is what happens when someone suddenly loses benefits because of a slight increase in their income, which pushes them over the welfare program's income eligibility threshold. So to show this phenomenon, I really wanted to show a real story of an individual in Washington, D.C., and so I spoke with a woman named Christy Gardner, who's lived in Washington, D.C. her entire life and has struggled through poverty and other issues and is currently on welfare, but her benefits have decreased dramatically. Some of the benefits she received have decreased over 90% in the past year, even though her income hasn't changed. It's been because of other programs she's received, like being reaching the age to be eligible for Medicaid. And so she's no better off. And so instead of relying on the government, has turned to nonprofit organizations to help bridge this gap in her income.
Yeah, and that's such an important thing. I've shared the story on this program before. I actually watched this in real time down in southern Utah. A young man who had been in prison, had been on drugs, been in the gang, been on the street, got his life together, got a job, got his children back, got housing. And I remember him coming into the office there, and he was so excited because he'd gotten a raise at his job because he was doing so well. And I remember his caseworker looking at him and saying, you can't accept the raise. You'll lose everything. You'll lose the kids. You'll lose the house, and these cliffs that you talk about. And so sometimes we end up with government programs well-intended, but often end up trapping people, or as we were just talking with former Representative Mia Love, that often they give people exactly what they need to stay exactly where they are. So how do we start changing that dynamic, and how do we do a better job of creating that upward mobility and a glide path, I guess, rather than those cliffs that you're describing?
It's a really hard thing to do to fix the welfare state because it's expanded dramatically. The welfare programs are administered at the federal, state, and even local levels, and they're incredibly confusing. There's different income eligibility levels for every program at these different levels. And even just at the federal level, there's over 100 different welfare programs. So to make it simpler for individuals and for these government offices, we need to consolidate these programs. There's a lot of programs that are very alike that administer food or clothing, and there's a lot of redundancy in the welfare state. And so consolidating would help a lot with program costs, of administrative costs, and it would lessen the bureaucracy of these programs. But that would really only be a start. To really then address the benefit cliffs, there would need to be a more gradual phase out of these programs, and that would be quite a tricky thing to do because it would mean spending more money, but in the long run, the government would hopefully be spending less money as these people would be pushed out of poverty instead of being stuck on these programs forever. They'd be able to get jobs and not be discouraged to take that raise like the man that you were speaking about, because if they take that raise, they can still get a benefit that makes sense for the money that they're going to be making in the new job.
Yeah, and that's so important because if they don't take that first job, then they don't get the next job, or they don't get that next raise or that next promotion. And if we really want upward mobility and self-reliance as the goal, you got to have a path to actually get there. And whether it's a single dad or a single mom, and suddenly they're saying, well, okay, if I take this job, that's going to have a negative impact on my children. No one's going to do that. That's just common sense. I'm going to do what's going to be best. And so often we end up treating people like liabilities to be managed rather than people with infinite value and potential. to be developed. And so as you've dug into this, Sophia, give us a sense, especially coming from a younger American, looking at, one, how do we deal with the duplicative nature of a lot of those programs? How do we change the mindset, especially at the federal level, to say, look, we have all of this bureaucracy. It's time to really assess that to make sure there's no waste, fraud, or abuse, but mostly that we're actually getting results that are being more helpful to those that we're trying to help?
That's such a great question. And I think both the left and the right looks at welfare completely wrong. The left looks at it, we need to spend more money, create more programs, so these people are getting more help. And then the right thinks that we need to slash everything. These people are lazy, but we know that that's not the case. They're rational beings. They're going to take the money that they can, and if a job will push them out of a program, they're not going to take that job. They're not going to take that raise. So we need to find some middle ground of something that makes sense. So consolidating the programs, having more gradual phase out of these benefits, having programs where they're encouraged to work and where you're pairing these cash benefits in the welfare programs with also helping like job training and finding employment and also housing. So it's a more well-rounded program rather than just handing cash and then taking it away the second that they do what they're supposed to be doing the right thing that the government is telling them to do, what society is telling them to do. Instead of punishing them, you're encouraging them to work ahead and make a better life for themselves and their children.
Yeah, absolutely. Sophia Hamilton, Social Mobility Fellow with Young Voices. Great piece at Reason.com. You should check that out today. Sophia, we appreciate you joining us, and I think this is the beginning of an important conversation. We had Joseph Grinny on our program last week, and so often we look at these issues and we think it's an asset problem, that they just need more assets, more funding, more cash. Sometimes it's behavior, sometimes it's skill set, but it's providing a different kind of path. But it all starts with a different kind of conversation. So, Sophia, thanks so much for helping us start that conversation. We look forward to having you back on the show soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Boyd.
Again, that's Sophia Hamilton, a Social Mobility Fellow with Young Voices. And this is really a great piece because so often we're looking at it backwards. And I think Sophia got it exactly right. Republicans are not looking at the issue the right way, and Democrats are not looking at the issue the right way. Because it's not about just spending more money, and it's not just about slashing money. It's having a different kind of conversation about what's the objective and what are we actually trying to do, and is what we're doing helping or hurting? And one of the biggest problems we have is, as Sophia mentioned, there's over 100 programs, over 100, and so many of them are duplicative. There's overlap of all kinds. There's waste, fraud, and abuse in the system. But the big issue for me is, let's just do an evaluation. Is it working? Is it helping people get out of poverty? Is it helping them with upward mobility? If we can have that kind of conversation, then it's not about just cutting or spending more. It's about producing the right results. And guess what? When we demand and are very clear about what the right result is, accountability is actually a pretty easy thing to do.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Utah Highway Patrol says they were called out to more than 100 crashes and slide-offs during last night's snow squall. Sergeant Cameron Roden says the storm moved fast, was dangerous in the areas where visibility was limited.
Depending on the area you were in with those whiteout, very heavy conditions, it's hard to see, and so you don't know if you're on the road, you don't know if other cars are around you. So there's a lot of visibility issues there, but those conditions also become very slick.
Roden says most of the crashes were just because people were going too fast for the conditions. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is still in the hospital today, apparently. The failure to immediately report his condition and medical treatment led to questions about how the White House found out. At the White House press briefing today, National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby was asked about that.
I'll let the Pentagon speak to the information flow, both publicly and inside the chain of command, but I can assure you that that throughout every step of the way, from the time we were notified until, yesterday when we all found out that he had prostate cancer, there was no lack of of curiosity on our part.
Austin was rushed to the intensive care unit on New Year's Day. White House officials didn't know yesterday that Austin was recovering from prostate cancer. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 147 points on the day right now. The NASDAQ is up 101. And our KSL weather's next. We could get another one of those snow squalls today. KSL News Time, 1:32.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-859-3220. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-859-3220. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-859-3220. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too. Call 800-859-3220. 800-859-3220 or biglou.com.
Looking for the best show deals on new and used RVs? You'll find them only in Ogden during the Northern Utah RV Show, January 11th through the 15th. We're bringing in new and used inventory and low show pricing inside the Golden Spike Event Center. For 4 full days, shop new and used travel trailers, fifth wheels, toy haulers, motorhomes, and more from the nation's top brands. Find early season discount pricing on all new models and fantastic used RV discounts like a 2011 Dutchman 185 DB Sport for just $9,995. You'll also find that every remaining 2023 is being sold at clearance pricing during the event. Plus, get no payments until April on approved credits and huge trade-in offers on your current RV. Go to NorthUtahRVShow.com to shop the best deals first. This show season, you'll find it all in Ogden. Admission and parking are free to the Northern Utah RV Show, January 11th through the 15th inside the Golden Spike Event Center. Open daily at 10 a.m., closed Sunday. Then we're back at it Monday, Martin Luther King Day from 10 to 5. Sponsored by Bish's RV. Don't miss it.
Advanced Window Products. Factory direct. Affordable windows. Call today. They're on their way. Financing available. Save now, pay later. AdvancedWindows.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair. Save up to 20 cents with Dino Pay. And here's Ricky Meese.
No accidents or delays on your Valley freeways, but the trouble is the snow in the higher elevations. Parley's has had snow plows going through, but the snow keeps coming down and coating that roadway, and that's anywhere from the mouth of Parley's to Kimball Junction. Then on Highway 40, we've had snow slowing the drive, making for slick driving conditions, and a couple of crashes causing backups on Highway 40 near Jordanelle. But that snowy drive on Highway 40 is in both Summit and Wasatch counties. Mortgage rates have fallen. Lower your payment. Find out more at loansbyrick.com. Equal housing lender NMLS 287106. That's loansbyrick.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, dry and cold weather until another snow squall moves through this evening. That could bring some additional snow as well, and another couple inches of snow tomorrow before things clear up. Right now, we're looking at 34 degrees with a snow shower. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, this headline caught my attention today, as it often does, especially if it has the name Tim Carney next to it. New proposal hurts families with multiple kids attending college. I think we have a few of those here in the state of Utah and across the country. Most college attendees are very familiar with the program known as FAFSA, F-A-F-S-A, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's an important part of financial package for people heading to college. And we want to look at what's going on and why things might be getting harder for families that might have more than one student attending college. And to help us break all of that down, we do turn to Tim Carney, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He studies civil society, family, and economic competition. He's also a senior columnist at the Washington Examiner. You can check out his article there at the Washington Examiner today. He's also the author of an upcoming book that's we're going to have him back on to talk about called Family Unfriendly, How Our Culture Made Raising Kids Much Harder Than It Needs to Be. Tim, Happy New Year. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me.
All right. So the Department of Education obviously plays a pretty critical role in financial aid. For our listeners, just kind of break that down in terms of what is this program, how does it work, and what are these new changes?
Yeah, so you might remember from when you went to college, or if your children are there or have gone there, the federal, it's the FAFSA is how I pronounce it. It's a federal financial aid form. So it serves two purposes. One, it's how the federal government allocates the subsidized student loans and federal grants, such as the Pell Grant, right? That it's how they calculate whether you are in need of this money. But it's very knowingly and widely used by private colleges when they're determining how they would hand out their own aid, and states would do this too. So it's kind of it's the entirety of federal student aid, and it's a bedrock of all state and private student aid, this application. And it was really complicated, and so Congress a few years ago wrote what they called the FAFSA simplification bill, and that has just gone into effect this January. And one of the consequences that not a lot of people knew about beforehand, including me, was exactly this, that people with multiple kids in college at the same time will probably end up paying more for college and be much less eligible for financial aid because of these changes. As this often happens with changes, nobody really knows until it's already implemented. And so break it down in terms of let's just say we've got a family, let's say we have neighbors. One has one child going to college, one has two. Walk us through what they're going to experience. Well, the basic thing is that what the formula does, is it calculates how much you can afford to pay for college. So it looks at your income. It sets aside a certain amount that says, okay, this is your bare living expenses that you need. Sort of like with taxes, how we used to have the exemption, and now we have the deduction. Set aside the bare expenses. Above that, some percentage of your income and your assets, they expect you to pay to tuition. The more income you have, the more you're expected to pay. What it has always been to date is that if they calculate, you can afford about $30,000 in tuition based on your income and your savings and checking account, they used to say, and you're sending two kids to college, so $30,000 is the total you'll pay, $15,000 per kid, and the rest will be covered by grants and loans. Now they don't do that last part. They say, you can afford to pay $30,000 in college for both of your kids. So now you're talking $60,000. And to put that in a little perspective, I have three children who will be in high school next year, which means 5 years from now, I could very well have three children in college. They would expect me to pay over 120% of my income plus my savings in college tuition. That is all the money I've saved up plus all the money I make plus another 20% is what they would expect for me to be able to hand over. So it makes zero logical sense, but as of January 1st, it's a law.
Wow. And that's often how these things play out. And so now what is the path forward with this? Are there any paths in terms of the fix there? Or are we into just kind of dealing with that? Is there anything that can be done either by legislation at the federal level? Is it something a governor could take on in terms of how this gets implemented at the local level? What does that look like?
Well, certainly states will have to, and private colleges are going to have to make their own policies that deviate from this. They're going to have to say, okay, we are going. So there would be nothing to stop a state school from allocating its financial aid the old way. So this will impose a burden on Utah because Utah probably benefited the most from what they used to call the sibling discount. So less money coming from federal grant money and more would have to come from the state government. So that's the first thing. So the states, if they have just been following what the federal government does on this, states are explicitly going to have to change that and say, no, you will, your ability to pay will be divided by the number of children in college. That's step number one. Step number two is for Congress to change this. I don't think most members of Congress realize what they were doing, that they were passing an anti-family bill. Even the language used by the people who defended it says, well, no, we should be considering students as individuals rather than as parts of family. I don't think we should be considering people more as individuals and parts of family. That's exactly the problem that you and I have been talking about every time we've gotten on the air for the last 5 years. And so Congress could go ahead and just say, actually, no, we still are going to divide the financial aid, the parents' ability to pay by the number of kids in college. That would be a pretty simple bill. I've made calls into Capitol Hill to see if there's any desire to do that. I haven't heard back yet. It's also possible, and I don't know, that the Education Department could issue a rulemaking that changes its implementation. That's something, lawyers and the Education Department will have to figure out.
Yeah, and I think that's so vital. And this is one that everyone ought to weigh in with your member of Congress, because this is clearly one where just the rulemaking folks just got a lot over their skis, or a lot anti-family over their skis in terms of how this happened and rolled out. Like you said, I haven't found anybody in Congress who knew this was happening or that this started in January or what this rule was. But hopefully there'll be somebody with some bold leadership there to make this happen, either by rule change, as you said, or whether Congress needs to step in and make something happen that way. And that leads me to where I want to round out. I want you to give us a little bit of a tease, a little projection forward. You got a new book coming up here in March called Family Unfriendly: How Our Culture Made Raising Kids Much Harder Than It Needs to Be. We've just given one example of how it's become harder to get your kids into college. But give us a little behind-the-scenes look in terms of the genesis of this book. You always do the deep dive and crisscross the country to make sure you're on path there. Tell us what your experience has been.
Well, since I'm thinking of Utah right now, I'll say that it was speaking to Natalie Gotchnauer over there in Salt Lake City, a demographer at the University of Utah. And she made the point to me that the Catholics, I'm a Catholic, she said the Catholics in America who have the most children are the Catholics who live in Utah. And she said there's something in the air here where we just have more kids. And I visited Israel on a religious retreat and stayed around a couple days to ask people why Israel has such a higher birth rate than any country in Europe, any other wealthy country, and that's even true for the non-religious. The secular Jews have more babies in Israel than the whole population in Europe per woman. And what I found was that in these communities, it wasn't just the religious teaching that led people to have more children. It was that the religious communities had created a culture, maybe a subculture in some places, but a culture that was family-friendly, that supported people, that made it, hey, it's normal to have a handful of kids. Hey, we will support you in having kids. Hey, we'll charge per family at the annual picnic rather than per person. Just all of these little things added up to a culture that was family-friendly. And then I looked at the birth rate in the U.S. It's been falling ever since 2008. It didn't rebound when the economy did. So that made it clear to me that our broader culture in the United States is not, in fact, family-friendly. It's family-unfriendly. And the argument of the book is that's the problem. That has to change.
Yeah, and there's so many components to that, everything from this kind of being afterthought in terms of family and children to even the way we go about parenting, kind of the helicopter parenting, hyper-controlled, checklist-driven, super team sponsored, all of the things that are exhausting and exasperating everyone. Give us one thing just to be thinking about as we look forward to March and the book coming out that might be part of the solution moving forward.
Well, near me, there's a program that practices that runs a lacrosse camp program year-round, and it's called Next Level Lacrosse. And so these are 8-year-old boys trying to get to the next level, and they're meeting there 3 or 4 times a week, and it's really intensive and really expensive, and I don't think it helps anybody. It doesn't create next-level lacrosse players. It creates more anxious parents and more anxious kids. So what I say is the best team for your kid, if you're going to put them in sports, is the one that practices across the street. So don't put them in next level lacrosse, what the society expects you to do today. Put them in next door lacrosse. Put them in whatever is the easiest thing for your family. That too many people center their lives, their family lives, around trying to get maximum achievement for their kids instead of building a strong, healthy family culture.
Yeah, so much more than maximum achievement. It's really the maximum meaning is what we ought to be going for, and that's rarely found in a checklist, a to-do list, or a super team trophy at the end of the year. And as always, Tim Carney, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, also Senior Columnist at the Washington Examiner. Check out, he's actually got 2 pieces up at the Examiner right now. You can check those out, dealing with what's happening with this rule as it relates to federal student aid. That's a crucial one that is clearly not family-friendly at all. Congress, governors, everybody's got to pipe up, speak up, and make something change there. That's a crucial one. Then we'll look forward to Tim's book coming up in March, Family Unfriendly, How Our Culture Made Raising Kids Much Harder Than It Needs to Be. Tim, as always, we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Boyd.
All right. Again, that's Tim Carney from American Enterprise Institute. Great thinker. And he's someone who doesn't just write, doesn't just sit in a think tank and think. He does the hard work and heavy lifting. He gets out into community. He crisscrosses the country for real conversations. And that's why he always gets to the better solutions and the better conversations. We'll be right back.
At Grainger, we're for the ones who specialize in saving the day and for the ones who've mastered the art of keeping business moving. We offer industrial-grade supplies for every industry with same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders, all backed by real people ready to help. So you can get the right answers and products right when you need them. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Progressive knows we're all trying to save right now.
Hey, at least we're still enjoying baseball on a Saturday night, right?
Even if it is T-ball.
Yeah, but tickets to the majors are just so expensive now. And who knows, maybe we're seeing a pro in the making.
Sure, in like 20 years.
How is he safe? Boo! This ump stinks!
The ump is only 14. We don't really do that.
Oh, my bad. You're doing a great job, ump.
Progressive offers you savings without sacrifice. So save big when you bundle home and auto. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers. Not available in all states.
The monster is coming, and it wants you and your family.
And that's great news, really, because it's time for the Bear Lake Monster Winterfest, January 26th through the 28th. Winterfest is all about an incredible celebration of winter and all the fun it brings. So start Friday with Monster Winter Sports and Trails Day, a free event featuring fat tire bikes, snowshoes, snowmobiles, and tubes for the kids. Also a taste of Bear Lake, with local restaurants dishing up their tasty specialties. Then Saturday, it's the Monster 5K Walk and Run, a Monster Cisco Disco Tournament, chili cook-off, even a cardboard boat regatta, followed by the famous Monster Plunge. Come on, Bear Lake awaits. Visit BearLakeMonsterWinterfest.com for pre-registration times and locations. That's BearLakeMonsterWinterfest.com. Presented by Bear Lake Visitors Bureau and Bear Lake Chamber.
When words come out of our mouths and everything sounds fine, no one bats an eye. But if things come out a little jumbled or letters sound different than most, there's speech therapy. But did you know that speech therapy is used for more than just stuttering or disfluency? From articulation to expressive and receptive language to a simple act of swallowing that most of us take for granted, speech therapy can do amazing things for you, your health, and of course your sense of self. That's why Summit Speech Therapy is here. Summit Speech Therapy works with people of all ages, from infants and toddlers who have a difficult time feeding or eating, TBI, stroke, or coma patients, to children and adults with speech problems. So much of it is all related, and Summit Speech Therapy can help. Summit works with all insurance companies as well as private pay options, and the experience can be life-changing. With clinics up and down the Wasatch Front, including Murray, with no long waiting for an appointment. For more, visit SummitSLP.com. That's SummitSLP.com.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. And as we look at higher education coming under the microscope for a number of reasons lately, very few of them in the good category, we want to dig into this just a little bit more. And I actually want to start this segment by going back to a conversation we had with Richard Reeves, who's actually founded a new group to tackle something very interesting in higher education, and that is the gender gap. And it's, as often is the case on this show, it's not what you think. It's time to think again about what that gap is and what it actually looks like. Take a listen.
It's one of the things most frustrating about this debate, frankly, is that somehow if you're identifying problems that a lot of boys and men are having, that means that we don't still think there are problems facing many women and girls. There clearly are, and much more work to do in many areas of society for women and girls. It's not a zero-sum game. It's a false choice.
And as we often say, the fake fight and the false choice always gets us into trouble. And so when we look at higher education and a drop in male success at universities, that the gender gap that we saw back in the 70s has kind of flipped from a gender gap against females to now against males in terms of who's not performing. And we want to get into the middle of all of this, and really thrilled to have back on the program with us Beth Akers, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, researches higher education, student loans, workforce development. Beth, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
You've been diving into this. It was fun to kind of go back and rethink our conversation with Richard Reeves. We know he's been very busy on this particular issue. You've been really digging into this as well. Give us some just framing in terms of what is the present reality when it comes to higher education and the challenges that many men are facing in higher ed.
Well, it's sort of the gender gap, but backwards. I think, like, if you were to poll people on the street and say, who do you think is enrolling in college at higher rates, who's performing better, who's graduating at higher rates, you would maybe guess men, or at least someone from my generation would. But the reality is that the women are enrolling at higher rates. Over 60% of new enrollment is females. We're also seeing that women have higher GPAs. The deficit is about 15% relative to men. And then, once they're enrolled, we see that, failure to finish is actually pretty common, but it's actually far more common among men. So women are really doing quite well when it comes to their achievement in higher education. And it's almost like the system that we have is working well to, match this particular strengths that women tend to have on average, and maybe less so men. So it's kind of an interesting topic to dive into because it's one that a lot of people don't really want to hear. Yeah, and it is one of those think again moments of, wait a minute, that's not what I thought it was going to be. And so help us understand that a little bit, unpack that a little bit in terms of why are we seeing that trend and why is that gap growing in higher ed? Well, so we have seen this gap growing for a long time. And I think that there were a lot of forces working against women and girls in their education that we sort of tackled head on in terms of, making sure that they stayed engaged with STEM, building confidence, eliminating barriers that existed for men. And I honestly think what's happened, and I think Richard might agree with this too, is that what we're seeing is that the aptitudes that women have relative to men, again, on average, tend to be the types of aptitudes that would have them succeed in our higher education system as it is designed today. So to make that a little bit clearer, think of things like, all the research shows like that boys learn better through physicality, and girls are better at sitting down and learning, through like quiet study. And which is favored in our traditional higher ed system right now is that sit down, quiet studying type of learning. And we've kind of poo-pooed a little bit the more active style of learning, whether they be in the trades through more active work or even through just on-the-job training through things like apprenticeships that might actually be a better match for the aptitudes that we see men displaying on average more than women. Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing. And going through one of the pieces that you've written, Beth, you did mention our friend Richard Reeves and the fact that with his liberal bona fides strongly in place, he gets away with saying some things that maybe somebody on the conservative side of the spectrum wouldn't be able to say. But what are some of those conversations that we ought to be having regardless of the political spectrum of it all, and what is the best thing for young men and young women in higher education? Well, I think, the first thing, of course, is having to admit that men and women are different. And, we've seen popular thinkers canceled for highlighting those differences. And we may need to acknowledge that our education systems need to support men and women differently, or at least offer different types of programming that would favor the types of aptitudes that men tend to have more often. So again, I think this is moving away from the traditional classroom lecture style education system and towards something that can be a bit more hands-on and requires less of, that ability to engage in quiet activity and very high levels of executive function, to manage the ability to get through coursework and connect all the dots that need to be connected in order to complete a college degree, because it actually requires a very high level. I think there's a lot of movement towards consumer-friendly higher education that would probably advantage men more than women, or play to men's weaknesses on average relative to women more than to women. So I think places like Western Governors University, which is based here in Salt Lake City, runs a national online education program, has those sorts of advances. They make it easy for people to enroll. They can do it at their own time. Just the sorts of things that we're used to in terms of customer service and things being relatively easy for us, I think would go a long way. And higher education is just so stuck in doing things the way that they've always done things. And I think what we're seeing is that has an advantage for women.
Yeah. And so we just in our last minute or so here, Beth, as you look at some of the challenges, you mentioned some of those non-traditional schools. Trade schools have also been surging a little bit. That might be a value shift for men. Give us kind of a sense in terms of what you're watching as we roll into 2024 in terms of trends or things that might be shifting that might help, again, both men and women.
Well, the challenge has always been for these new types of education to compete with the old guard. And I think what we're seeing happening is that people are becoming critical of kind of old school higher ed. And I think that's great, because that's going to mean more opportunities for new business models to get involved. It means more options for students as they consider a pathway to a career.
I love that. Beth Akers always gets us right to the heart and the essence of the issue, especially when it comes to higher education. Beth's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And Beth, we always appreciate your insight and perspective on the show. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, great to talk to you. Take care.
All right. Again, that's Beth Akers, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, focuses on higher education in particular. And I do just find this so fascinating that we've had this flip. In the 70s, it was a very male-dominated higher education force, and the men were getting in more. They were succeeding more, thriving more. And now we have absolutely flipped that script where more women are enrolled in higher education, and they're succeeding at a higher rate. And men are falling behind and failing at a higher rate. And as Richard Reeves mentioned in our previous conversation, this doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We can help everybody thrive and succeed, but it requires us to think again and think differently about what we think about higher education.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. The FBI office in Utah is hoping to reach more people in minority communities who may be victims of hate crimes. Special agent in charge, Shohini Sina, says they're seeing a rise in electronic hate crimes.
Loads may be made on social media. They may be made via email. They may be voicemails. And then actual face-to-face threats are somewhat less prevalent, but nonetheless a deep concern of ours.
The FBI in Utah releasing a new PSA today in 8 languages, encouraging people to report hate crimes. The ice castles in Midway open next Monday. That's later than originally planned, thanks to a warm December. Ice artisans working to finish the caves and tunnels and fountains and frozen thrones and towers of color-changing ice. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has run into some trouble with his Republican colleagues. 13 members of his conference blocked action on the House floor to protest an agreement that he reached with Democrats aimed at avoiding a partial shutdown of the government at the end of next week. ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy explains.
The House operates day-to-day on the party line passage of resolutions that govern debate. If the rules don't pass, the House can't function as the Speaker intends. And that's what's happened here, with a baker's dozen conservatives siding with Democrats to effectively scrap the day's legislative agenda. Those conservatives are angry that Speaker Mike Johnson has struck a handshake deal with Democrats on spending levels. It's the first big Republican revolt of Johnson's speakership.
And your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average moving even higher today, 170 points up now, and the NASDAQ is up 111. Our KSL weather, look out for that snow squall we're expecting this afternoon. That's next. KSL News Time 2:02.
It's a priority for us at this station to bring you all sides of a story and to talk about the news fairly, completely.
Get all the facts and be really aware. Utah's Morning News with us, Tim and Amanda.
Weekday mornings 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Up to a 30% upfront bonus and 12% per year guaranteed growth for retirement. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, and these are the highest guarantees with annuities I have seen in my life. When interest rates are this high, there are silver linings, and annuity guarantees are one of them. Up to a 30% bonus upfront for retirement income. On $100,000, that's up to $42,000 guaranteed in the first year. And it's because of the economy and its high interest rates. Don't let anyone, especially another financial advisor, tell you it's not true. Up to 30% upfront just for opening an account and up to 12% per year guaranteed income growth. Don't miss out. This won't last forever. If you have an old 401k, get up to 30% upfront and 12% guaranteed growth for income today.
Call 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600.
Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I was afraid to cut the cord, but I'm so glad I did. I was paying way too much for cable. I wasn't finding the shows I wanted, and the prices kept going up. Thankfully, I discovered a new way to watch called Philo. I get to see all my favorite stuff in one spot, anytime I want, anywhere I want, for just $25 a month. Plus, Philo's got unlimited DVR, so I never have to miss anything. It really is the best deal in TV. Try it out for yourself. Go to philo.tv. That's philo.tv. And start your 7-day free trial now.
Looking for the best show deals on new and used RVs? You'll find them only in Ogden during the Northern Utah RV Show, January 11th through the 15th. We're bringing in new and used inventory and low show pricing inside the Golden Spike Event Center. For 4 full days, shop new and used travel trailers, fifth wheels, toy haulers, motorhomes, and more from the nation's top brands. Find early season discount pricing on all new models and fantastic used RV discounts like a 2011 Dutchman 185 DB Sport for just $9,995. You'll also find that every remaining 2023 is being sold at clearance pricing during the event. Plus, get no payments until April on approved credits and huge trade-in offers on your current RV. Go to NorthUtahRVShow.com to shop the best deals first. This show season, you'll find it all in Ogden. Admission and parking are free to the Northern Utah RV Show, January 11th through the 15th inside the Golden Spike Event Center. Open daily at 10 a.m., closed Sunday. Then we're back at it Monday, Martin Luther King Day from 10 to 5. Sponsored by Bish's RV. Don't miss it.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair. Save up to 20 cents per gallon with DinoPay. Here's Ricky Meese.
Well, for those traveling I-80 in Parley's Canyon, some improvement, but you still could see a snowy road on I-80 in the upper portion of Parley's. We have big backups on southbound Highway 40 due to an accident near Jordanelle Reservoir. On the Salt Lake County freeways, you're good to go. We have the final cleanup of a crash at 1900 East and 1700 South. Common Spirit, hospitals, clinics, and caregivers, all connected to advanced health care in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Healthcare with Human Kindness is here. Hello, Human Kindness. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
And our KSL weather, dry and cold weather until this evening when another snow squall could move through the Wasatch Front during the afternoon commute. Another couple inches of snow would come with it, and we'll see snow showers again tomorrow morning before things clear up. And right now, we're at 34 degrees with a snow shower and some wind this afternoon. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
There's only a few days left until the Republican caucus in Iowa, which will follow with New Hampshire and then South Carolina. There is a flood of polling and prognostication in terms of where things are. But as always, we want to look past just the headline numbers. We do want to know who's leading and who's lagging, but we also want to know who cares and why. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
As the 2024 presidential cycle hits sprint mode here, now that we are officially into January, again, just a few days to the Iowa caucus, followed by New Hampshire and South Carolina. A lot of polling numbers coming out, a lot of prognostication coming out. And whenever we want to get past the headlines, we always go to the ultimate inside source, Carly Cooperman, partner and CEO of Schoen Cooperman Research, one of the best in the business. And Carly, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2024, and please help us get behind the numbers. What are you seeing? What should we be watching?
Happy New Year to you, too. Thanks so much for having me back. Everyone is watching. We are watching Iowa numbers coming in very closely, just a few days away before the election, and also just watching the poll data coming out of New Hampshire, which will closely follow Iowa. I don't think people are questioning if Trump will win Iowa. I mean, there's no reason to think he will not. But a lot of the conversation now is twofold. One, will his margin be as big as some of the polls are showing and as his campaign is projecting? Because at this point, the bar is set so high that I think if the margin is smaller in a meaningful way, it will still be a story that's not one of success for Trump. And then the second thing is who is going to finish in second place at this point, between DeSantis, who has really staked his candidacy at this point on his success in Iowa, and Nikki Haley, who we've seen surge in the polls really everywhere over the last a few weeks as there's been a lot of momentum behind her.
Yeah, so let's break down some of those components. First is the expectations game. Is always an interesting thing, especially in Iowa. As you mentioned, former President Trump has been focused on how big he will win, but how important it is that even if it's cold and snowy, you still have to show up in Iowa to cast that. But talk to us for a minute about the expectation game in terms of the DeSantis and Nikki Haley battle there for second place. As you mentioned, DeSantis has really put a lot in there. I think a little late. He started kind of high level and now is trying to grassroots the 99 counties. Is it too little too late for DeSantis? What are you seeing underneath the numbers there in terms of any kind of momentum in Iowa?
It used to be that it was really significant if you were, visiting all 99 counties and it was all a grassroots effort. And it used to be that really paid off. It's not that Iowa, the winner in the caucus, is always the one who's going to be the nominee at the end of the day, but it certainly is significant and gives you a lot of momentum to propel further into the primary season. And, as DeSantis' campaign has really struggled from the onset, at some point there was a shift in strategy to really double down there. And it makes a lot of sense in some ways in terms of his conservative values and his appeal, his religious appeal as well in connection to voters in the state. But, as a result, he has really staked his candidacy there. And if he has a really disappointing finish, I think it's going to be hard for him to make the case for continuing past those early states. Because if he doesn't do well there, then it's kind of hard to see where else he does well, and it's kind of hard to see how he has a path. Nikki Haley has a much wider path from this initial state because the polls in the last few that have come out have really showed her neck and neck with DeSantis. That was not the expectation initially, so I think that's only going to propel her. If she has a stronger win, it propels her further going into New Hampshire, where she is, really surging. If she does just so, it'll kind of be like, okay, let's see what happens in New Hampshire. So, she sort of has a wider path to make the case for herself coming out of this initial election, but she certainly wants to have a strong showing herself to prove that she is in fact surging in a real way.
Yeah, and I think that surge and that momentum is an interesting thing. I want you to get underneath the numbers on New Hampshire for a moment with Nikki Haley. Let's say she does do well, either finishes second or it's neck and neck with she and DeSantis. So she comes out with a little bit of momentum. As you alluded to, she's really surged in New Hampshire. Some polls showing her even within single digits of the former president.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that, and then also talk about the Chris Christie factor. Some of the under the numbers I was looking at today showed that a good chunk of those Chris Christie supporters, if he were out, would swing towards Nikki Haley. Does that create more of a call for Chris Christie to bow out? Give us some of the dynamics in play there.
Yeah, I mean, there was a poll that finished just 2 days ago in New Hampshire that came out that had Haley within 7 points of Trump. And another one that came out at the beginning of the year where she was within 4 points of Trump. On average, Trump certainly has the lead in the state, but I think nobody would have expected her to be that close even a few weeks ago. And now it seems like, at first it was kind of like, well, she might have a strong second place finish, but, it seems like, especially based on what comes out of Iowa, like if Trump has a disappointing finish, if Haley has a stronger than expected finish, it could shift the dynamics in New Hampshire in a way that makes things, really interesting. And then from there, there's South Carolina, her home state, and so while she's solidly second in the polls there, so far she hasn't been close to Trump. The whole thing with these early states, it's not so significant in terms of the delegates. It's just all about the momentum, and at a certain point, candidates have to start dropping out.
Yeah.
And that's where the Chris Christie factor comes in because, he has not been able to break through in a significant way like Haley has been able to, and yet it does make sense. It seems like they are competing for a certain non-Trump type of Republican primary voter, and so I absolutely would think that at this point it feels like a vote for one could hurt the other, and vice versa, or really just help Trump. But it doesn't appear to be. It does not seem like Chris Christie would drop out ahead of New Hampshire like the Haley campaign would like.
Yeah, so interesting there. And as you said, Haley does appear to have a little wider path in terms of that. You also alluded to the fact that I think this is so important for us to all remember that out of those first three states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, the grand total of delegates is 112. Out of the 1,235 that you have to get to be the Republican nominee. So it's not about the number. That's only it's less than 10% of what you need to get there. But as you alluded to, Carly, it is the momentum, it is the perception, and ultimately that leads to campaign cash and donors moving forward. Just in our last minute, give us one thing that you're watching for, maybe under the radar, as we move through these first three states.
Just to be clear, like it still would be very shocking if Donald Trump was not to come out on top in all of this. I don't want to be misleading in that regard. It's fascinating to see what's happening these final days, and I'm watching really closely to see how Trump continues to poll, and not just in the primaries, but at the same time. I mean, there was a poll that came out today that showed him with a huge lead over Biden in Michigan, which is it was honestly shocking, and it just is reinforcing the fact that Trump still seems to have this strong hold over Republican primary voters. And, over the electorate in general right now, the way where we're, seeing him positioned in a way that is not showing a real weakness yet.
Yeah, no question. Carly Cooperman, best in the business, CEO of Schoen Cooperman Research. Carly, thanks for weighing in today.
Sure, thanks so much.
All right, again, that's Carly Cooperman. She's partner and CEO of Schoen Cooperman Research, and always gets us to the right spot in terms of what we should be watching, what we should ignore when it comes to those numbers. And there's a lot to come, and it's interesting to see where the voters really are and what's really driving those voters. And as Carly alluded to, in places like Michigan, you start looking at head-to-head potential matchups between the current president, the former president. Sometimes interesting, sometimes baffling, sometimes head-scratching. There's a long, long way to go in all of this. And so we'll keep watching those numbers, and we'll watch what's underneath the numbers that will ultimately drive who sits in the Oval Office in 2025. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. We asked for it.
We need a healthy snowpack to fill our reservoirs.
Now we're getting it.
The plows have gone through here, but it is definitely still slick.
Emergency traffic.
Icy conditions on the road, even with the plows throwing down some salt.
Well over a foot of snow for the Wasatch Front total.
Now that we're finally seeing snow in the valleys, you should know KSL is ready. Get updates with traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the 9s and emergency traffic at a moment's notice.
We have you covered at KSL News Radio.
Hey, anybody can tell you you're special, but our friends at Hercules Credit Union, they always actually show you that you're special. And that's what actually matters, especially when it comes to your money. So right now, Hercules Credit Union is going to show you that you are indeed special. When you open up a new checking account at Hercules Credit Union, they will upgrade you to a premier checking account for free. No monthly fees. You get all the upgrades and benefits that go with being a premier checking account holder. You get identity theft protection, travel benefits, all kinds of different perks, cellular care coverage, and so much more. So all you have to do is open up a new checking account at Hercules Credit Union. We'll upgrade you to a premier checking status free of any monthly fees with all the benefits that go with it. You can check out their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, and Salt Lake City. Or as always with our friends at Hercules Credit Union, you can find them online at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
It seems like everywhere you look right now, someone is sick. This year, prepare your family for airborne invaders like bacteria, pollen, and yes, germs with Navage Nasal Care. Navage flushes ultra-pure, refreshing saline in one nostril, around the back of the nose, and out of the other nostril. Navage sucks out viruses, dust, and other airborne particles, all the stuff that gets trapped in your nose, making you miserable. Don't get caught empty-handed this winter. Get Navage, the drug-free solution that helps you breathe easier, sleep better, and feel healthier. Even better, Navage is HSA, FSA eligible, so Navage is a great way to spend those funds before they expire. Don't wait a minute longer. Buy Navage today and you'll breathe easier knowing you're putting your funds to good use. Navage is available online at Navage.com or Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E. Clean nose, healthy life.
How's the water where you live? Depending on where you live in Utah, the water coming out of your tap might be really hard and not taste very good. It might be leaving spots on your glasses and shower and leaving your skin dry.
We want you to know our friends at Superior Water and Air have solutions for your home and your business, by the way. They have the best, most efficient water softeners in Utah, but not only that, they also have water purifiers that will give your family crystal clear drinking water.
And if you're still using those big unsanitary water bottles in your office, let Superior hook you up to a more convenient, trusted water system.
When you think of Superior Water and Air, think of solutions for everything in your home, from plumbing to water heaters to furnaces and air conditioning, and of course those great home standby generators.
To keeping the air in your home as healthy as possible, especially during these inversions. I had Superior install two things in my home that have helped us so much. We have an air purifier and a humidifier hooked right up to our furnace.
Call Superior today, 974-9090, or go to superiorwaterandair.com.
Everybody has their own personal reason for why they come to Soda Weight Loss, why they decide they want to lose the weight finally. I mean, my decision was, if I don't lose the weight now, I'm afraid I'm just going to give up and settle for being this unhealthy weight for the rest of my life. But Jim came to it for a different reason.
My decision was personal from the standpoint of, I have the family history of family members being obese, and I did not want that. And I figured now would be a good time that I could take control of something.
Take control of something.
Yeah, and let me tell you why it's also a good time to do it right now, because you could win a full year of Soda's amazing program and a $2,000 wardrobe makeover in Soda's Shape Up Showdown. Here's all you have to do. Just email shapeup@sodaweightloss.com.
SodaWeightLoss.com. That's SOTA weightloss.com.
You know what they say, Amanda? Soda Weight Loss is state of the
art.
Advanced Window Products. High-efficiency windows. $2,500 off 10 windows or more for a limited time. AdvancedWindows.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, the FBI wants to make sure people feel safe reporting possible hate crimes. Second, the Midway Ice Castle's opening a little late this winter because December was so warm. Third, the Republican Speaker of the House running into new resistance from some conservative members of his party. Right now, 34 degrees with a snow shower in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Well, in just 9 days, the first big spending deadline will be hit, and if not addressed properly by members of Congress, the government will run out of funding. It would be a partial government shutdown because of the bifurcated way in which they've gone about trying to fund the government this time around, so a little different process. We did avoid the big showdown just before the Christmas holiday, but don't you worry, we're going to get it in 2 pieces here to start the year. So coming up on January the 19th is the first deadline. The second is on February the 2nd, which I keep pointing out, ironically or tragically, is Groundhog Day, which seems to be where we are stuck when it comes to Congress doing their job. And yes, doing your job is part of your job. That's our new mantra for the year for Congress. Doing your job is part of your job. And part of your job is funding the government. And the reality is currently we have the House and the Senate that are actually working on what should have been completed and done back in September. Should have been done in September. So, again, that's the fiscal year for the government. Ends on September the 30th. It comes every year. And Congress usually kicks the can down the road because they didn't do their job, which is part of their job. So now here we are in January. They still haven't done their job. But guess what they should be doing? They should actually be working on the appropriations bills that are due in September. Because if you do it right, it actually does take some time. But instead, we're going to keep fighting about last year's budget and last year's funding. So that's where we are. Now, good news over the weekend. There was a top-line number agreed to by both the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate, the leaders, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, and Speaker Johnson, Republican Speaker of the House. They got to the top-line number. Now they have to take those top-line numbers, just as you would with your budget. Now you got to get them to the line item. Where do they go so you can actually vote? So late yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer gave an update on the floor, talking about where the spending negotiations stand as that first deadline approaches just 9 days away.
First, a lot of work to do. We started with funding the government and working towards a national security supplemental. We're off to a good start. This weekend, I announced, along with congressional leadership and President Biden, a top-line agreement to keep the government funded and avoid a shutdown. We have only 10 days until the first deadline. And the good news is I think all 4 appropriators want to get this done as fast as possible. Our goal is to roll up our sleeves and try to get this done.
So that was Leader Schumer. Now, Leader McConnell from the Republican side also highlighted the urgency of this. Nobody wants a shutdown. But he does expect, a little more pessimistically, that they're going to require another continuing resolution. That's that little thing that allows us to keep spending at current levels without anybody having to really vote on it.
We need to pass a supplemental. There needs to be a strong border provision part of it, and our hope is that we'll get an outcome and get it soon. Obviously, we're going to have to pass a CR as well. I have no idea yet. It's up to the Speaker and the Majority Leader to determine the length of the CR.
All right, so as we look at how that has been playing out, the big challenge, of course, is on the House side. Speaker Johnson has a very tough challenge on his hands in appeasing a very narrow majority. It's just a couple of votes now is the only majority the Republicans have in the House. And so that's going to be a challenge for sure. Now, just within the last hour, Speaker Johnson has hit that challenge. And really interesting, 13 Republicans joined with all of the Democrats. So it's important to keep that in perspective. We often talk about just the 13 who voted against this rule that would allow them to start debating some spending measures. But it was 13 Republicans and all the Democrats. Every Democrat voted against this rule to prevent it. Also very interesting, Utah's Blake Moore, who's the vice chair of the House Republican Conference, he actually changed his vote at the end to oppose the rule. And the reason he did that was strategic. He wants to be allowed to bring up the rule for another vote later on, and you can't do that if you voted on the other side. So he actually joined that group. So there's always a reason. Sometimes we look at these votes and we just lump them all together. You really have to pull them apart to say, well, was there a strategic reason to do that? And Blake Moore clearly was doing that for strategic purposes. But let's go back to the Speaker of the House as he talked to reporters earlier today, talking about that. He really went down the path that his predecessor, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, went to in terms of taking some heat in terms of what's happening there. And as he was going through that, he actually described what he thinks this deal is actually all about, a down payment to start doing and being more fiscally responsible.
Look, leadership is tough. You take a lot of criticism. This is a very serious priority of mine. This deal, this agreement, is a down payment on restoring us to fiscal sanity in this country. It's critically important. Remember, last week, we crossed a dangerous threshold, $34 trillion in federal debt. The scale of this is incredible. So we have to bend the spending curve. We have to cut more, and we're going to. And I think we demonstrate we govern well. We're going to grow the House majority, and for the Republican Party in this upcoming election, I believe Republicans are going to win the Senate and the White House. And we're going to turn this thing completely around, and I can't wait to do it.
All right, so I think that's a really important statement there from Speaker of the House, talking about the fact that he's not happy with where they are in terms of all of this spending, and that if you're going to bend that curve and start to make real change in terms of spending, you have to start somewhere. And it's very challenging to start from somewhere when that somewhere is a very closely divided House. When you only have a 2-vote majority to get something passed, that becomes really difficult. It also becomes very difficult when no one on the Democratic side has been willing to cross over and say, for the good of the country, or to make a down payment on getting some fiscal sanity, I am going to vote for this. And so while most of the attention today will be focused on 13 Republicans going against Speaker Johnson, it should also be noted that every Democrat did the same thing. Much like when Speaker McCarthy was ousted, it wasn't the ousting because of a few Republicans. It was the fact that every single Democrat also voted to oust the Speaker. So the politics, again, regardless of whether you're on the left or the right on all of this, the reality is politics is ruling the day, not good policy, and not what's best for the American people. And that's what's broken in our nation's capital. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour. Shelters in Utah struggling to keep up with those who are being caught out in the cold. KSL News Radio's Michael Commit reports.
Temperatures across Utah are dropping beneath 15 degrees at night, and in Salt Lake County, there's a search for volunteers who can man the late-night hours at warming centers. More volunteers means there are less people on the streets during these frigid nights. Anyone who'd like to help is encouraged to reach out to the Salt Lake County.
And every county in northern Utah is under a code blue right now. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The 737 MAX 9 jetliners made by Boeing are grounded after that incident with a door blowing off an Alaska Airlines plane last week. It's having an impact on passengers across the country. ABC's Alex Stone reports.
Today alone, United has canceled 167 MAX 9 flights. It says it's still operating some of the flights that were supposed to be on MAX 9s by switching to other aircraft. Alaska Airlines says it's canceling all of its MAX 9 flights at least through Saturday. Both airlines are waiting for the FAA to tell them what they need to do to fly their MAX 9s again. The FAA is keeping them grounded.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average ending trading today at 170 points up. The NASDAQ was up 111. The S&P 500 up about 27 points today. And our KSL weather looks like we could see another one of those snow squalls this afternoon. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
The new year is the perfect time to make some positive changes for your body and your health. If you've been enjoying a little too much food, too many sweets, and too much liquid cheer over the holidays, then you've probably put a lot of stress on your liver. A great way to show your liver some love and to detox your system is simply adding Active Liver to your daily routine. Active Liver is one of many award-winning natural health products from New Nordic, the #1 supplier of dietary supplements in Scandinavia. Available as a tablet or delicious gummy, Active Liver is an easy and effective way to keep your liver healthy and functioning properly all year long. You ask a lot of your liver, so give it the support it needs with Active Liver. You can find Active Liver at Amazon.com, or for a volume discount, visit NewNordicUSA.com. Go to NordicUSA.com, Amazon, or ask for Active Liver at your local CVS. New year, new you, New Nordic.
If you're trying to decide which gutter protection to put on your home, don't just ask how they'll handle leaves. Ask how they'll handle ice. Tim Jr. here from RGS Exteriors, and that's right, ice. See, plenty of gutter guards are good at keeping out leaves, but most are made with flimsy materials that can bend, buckle, and break under the weight of too much ice. Kind of a big problem in an icy state like Utah, right? At RGS Exteriors, our exclusive gutter protection systems are built Utah tough. They're made with premium strength materials that hold up to 1,200 pounds of ice per square foot. Simply put, they're not going to budge. Our gutter guards are also certified to handle hurricane-level winds and rain. Mother Nature can't damage them. Guaranteed. Utah Tough Products. That's the RGS way. For a free estimate, call 801-280-3110 or visit rgsexteriors.com. That's rgsexteriors.com or 801-280-3110.
Mr. Max Buy One Get One sale. Buy one suit for $299. Get the second for $100. Any style, any occasion. Free alterations in 9 locations. Mr. Mac.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair. Save up to 20 cents per gallon with DinoPay. Here's Ricky Meeks.
We do have the final cleanup of an accident northbound I-15 at the 600 North on-ramp in Salt Lake City. It's not going to cause you any problems. Where you could see problems, higher elevations, especially canyon roads, where we're still seeing snowfall coating some of those roads. But in the valley, we're still waiting for the storm to come through. We will keep you posted with triple team traffic this afternoon with the latest snowy road updates here on KSL News Radio. Custom designed the perfect engagement ring for your perfect person at J. Brooks Jewelers in Lehigh, Murray, and online at jbrooksjewelers.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, we'll see another snow squall move through this afternoon, and another couple inches of snow could come with it. Then we'll see snow showers tomorrow morning before things clear up. And right now, 34 degrees and cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com, or Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, of course, 2024 is a presidential election year. We've been covering a lot of that today here on Inside Sources. But it's not just a presidential election year here in the United States. There's also some crucial places around the world that are also having elections this year, including Taiwan. Taiwan's voters are picking their president on Saturday this week. And very interesting what we will learn, what we will find out. Between the two major candidates, they have very different views in terms of the relationship with China and the United States, for that matter. And as always, we turn to the ultimate expert, Phelim Kind, D.C.-based China correspondent for Politico, to help us sort it all out, where it actually is and what it actually means for us. And Phelim, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So as Taiwan gets ready to head to the polls on Saturday, tell us what you're watching for. How is that crucial election shaping up?
Well, it's looking like a horse race between the vice president, who's running for president, current vice president of the Democratic Progressive People's Party. His name is Lai Ching-te. He's pro-independence, as is the Democratic People's Party. He's leading, according to the most recent polls. But hot on his heels is the opposition Kuomintang, or KMT party, which has a policy of anti-independence, wants to have much closer ties with Beijing. So we kind of see this face-off between two visions of Taiwan's future, this idea that Taiwan maintaining this status quo of quasi-independence, and a party that's seeking to have closer ties with China in the hopes that that will neuter or reduce increasing Chinese belligerence toward the island.
I think this is such an interesting thing. No one's been really talking about this. You had a great piece in Politico today talking about what this could do to U.S.-China relations, depending on which way this goes. And so as you kind of pull that back and unpack it just a little bit for us, Phelim, as they go to the polls, give us some sense in terms of what does this look like? What does a Taiwanese-style presidential election look and feel like? And what should we be watching for over these closing 48 to 72 hours?
Yeah, I mean, Taiwanese elections, you got to remember that Taiwan was an authoritarian dictatorship for many decades. It emerged from that in the late 80s and is really this paradigm of how a former authoritarian state can become this bastion of progressive democracy that respects the rights of its people. And so, as you can imagine, with that background, the democratic process and elections are extremely boisterous, extremely loud. You have a very engaged, involved, enthusiastic electorate on all sides in all parties. And I think what we're going to be looking for is, there are three main candidates, right? And I think what's going to happen, what we're looking for is to see whether the two who are trailing Lai Ching-te of the DPP, whether one is going to throw their lot in with the other to try to foil a DPP victory. And so we're kind of seeing how that turns out in the next few days. But so far, it looks like, again, we're going to have a pro-independence leading party still in control, still leading Taiwan. And, of course, that's going to set off a lot of that's going to raise Beijing's hackles. And they've already been blaming the Biden administration for supporting these so-called separatists in Taiwan. So it's going to cause some tremors in the already fragile U.S.-China relationship.
Yeah, unless I want to dig into that just a little bit, too. So if Lai Ching-te actually does pull out the victory, what do you expect to see from Beijing? As you mentioned, they've already been kind of blaming the Biden administration and probably Nancy Pelosi and anyone else who's visited Taiwan in the last 2 years. But what else do you expect to see in terms of a reaction should Lai Ching-te actually pull off the victory?
Yeah, I think we need to recognize that, China has already been very active in terms of military harassment and intimidation around Taiwan, around that stretch of water between Taiwan and China, the Taiwan Strait. But the consensus is we're going to see a pretty radical uptick in that type of activity, and maybe possibly or even likely a repeat of the type of activity we saw after then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in 2022, where you'll remember there were several days live fire exercises that bracketed the island. We could also see Beijing economically punishing Taiwan for what they see as the mistake, the Taiwanese people's mistake in voting for someone who is pro-independence leaning. And that's going to put pressure on the U.S.-China relationship. It's already very fragile. And, it was just a few weeks ago we were talking about how President Joe Biden and China's leader Xi Jinping had come out of this meeting in San Francisco in November, pledging to try to patch up what's really a very frayed relationship. And if this Taiwan election and its result could really throw a spanner in the works in terms of raising tensions on both sides.
Yeah, and let's go to the flip side of that to explore what that might look like. Should the KMT party get a win, again, with a much more favorable angle and eye towards China and the mainland, what does that do to U.S. relations? Does that embolden China further as it relates to Taiwan and other places around the world?
Well, I mean, first, if China does respond with an uptick in military harassment and intimidation, you're going to see an outcry here in D.C. on Capitol Hill for efforts to bolster Taiwan's defenses, to make Taiwan more quickly this sort of porcupine that can fend off Chinese aggression. And that can really set off a sort of a spiral in negativity in the U.S.-China relationship as the U.S. takes efforts to try to assist Taiwan, which China will see as attempting to assist Taiwan toward legal de jure independence. So it's very and so if China, but here's the thing: China is also testing the ability to influence elections in Taiwan without using military threats. So we've also seen a lot of disinformation, misinformation, a fair bit of which frames the U.S. as an unreliable ally. This idea that's coming from Beijing that if the U.S. can't come up with the money to support Ukraine's battle against Russian aggression, why should Taiwan believe that the U.S. will do likely for Taiwan? So there's a lot of irons in the fire as every tool in the toolbox on this one.
Yeah, every tool in the toolbox. And I wanted to get to the toolbox because I did want to get to some of the misinformation, disinformation. We know China has tried that in the U.S. and in other areas around the world, now clearly squaring in terms of Taiwan. If they prove successful there in maybe turning some of that favorable look to the U.S., if people start to doubt the U.S. commitment, or if candidates that are more pro-mainland China and President Xi give us kind of that scenario in terms of what that might look like.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the Chinese government and through its proxies is able to successfully influence the Taiwanese election in a way that is favorable to them, and for what's favorable to Beijing is a victory by the opposition Kuomintang or KMT party, which wants to have closer ties with Beijing, which is explicitly anti-independence. And delegations of KMT party members regularly go to China. So they're seen as very close to Beijing. And if they're able to do that, that's going to be like beta testing for how Beijing might want to try to influence other elections. And there are dozens of them around the world this year. This is a big global election year, including, as you mentioned at the outset, we have a presidential election in this country in November. So, it really raises the stakes. It's not just this little island off of, the Chinese coast. The repercussions, the ramifications, and the ripples of what happens in Taiwan in the next few days on that Saturday vote could have profound implications for the U.S. and for its allies and partners.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that. You concluded your piece at Politico on this note, and I thought it was so important, this whole idea of strategic ambiguity, which has been the U.S. policy across multiple administrations. Does that really get stress tested should things go sideways in the election in Taiwan on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for your listeners. Strategic ambiguity is this idea that the U.S. is committed legally under something called the Taiwan Relations Act to oppose any efforts to forcibly or unilaterally change the status quo across the Taiwan Strait. But it doesn't actually say how the U.S. would do that. And so the U.S. has never had explicit policy that if China attempts to invade Taiwan, that we'll have U.S. boots on the ground to oppose it. That's always been ambiguous, although President Biden, 4 separate occasions in the last few years, has actually come out and said that's what we'll do. And I think what we're going to see in the next few days and few weeks, depending on how Beijing responds, but if there really is a dramatic uptick in military harassment and intimidation activities, what they call gray zone activities around Taiwan, you're going to see a growing chorus on Capitol Hill for an end to this ambiguity and to say clearly and upfront, Beijing, if you mess with Taiwan, you're messing with the U.S. military. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, and then final question for you, Phelim, before I let you go. I know you've got 27 irons in the fire yourself on this topic alone. As you look at the elections themselves, in terms of free and fair elections, clearly China is trying to influence their maximum pressure on a host of different fronts: information, misinformation, disinformation. How confident are people in terms of the free and fairness of those elections? Is the international community leaning in at all? Are there any things that you're kind of keeping your eye on rolling into the weekend that might put up some red flags in terms of any kind of nefarious activity?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And it's important to remember, this isn't Taiwan's first rodeo in terms of dealing with Chinese electoral interference or disinformation activities. And they have developed a very robust system to identify and to prevent or mitigate those types of activities. It's not foolproof. Taiwan is an open society, and open societies are vulnerable because information of all types can be flooding in. But in terms of the actual, this will be a fair election. This will be a free election. This will be a international sort of standard election. And I think what's uncertain is the degree to which disinformation from China might influence people to vote in a way that they think will protect Taiwan, that's safer for them, whether it's one way or the other. So we'll see how that turns out. And the Taiwanese government has promised to release a report about Chinese disinformation efforts after the election. So we'll see that in the days following the election on Saturday.
So many things to keep our eye on. We're grateful that Phelim Kine, D.C.-based China correspondent for Politico, is keeping his eye on everything for all of us. Again, it may seem like a little island off of the coast of the Chinese mainland. It has big implications for all of us. Phelim, thanks so much as always for breaking it down and helping us make the news make sense.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Again, that's Phelim Kine joining us, D.C.-based China correspondent for Politico. I don't think there's a better thinker or anyone who understands what's going on in China and Taiwan better than Phelim Kine. Always grateful to have him on the show. We'll watch it. It's a big presidential election in Taiwan on Saturday. We'll be right back.
Imagine a Utah without income tax.
If Utah did pull this off, we'd be just the 10th state in the nation to completely get rid of income tax.
Imagine how the state might make up for it.
Senate Majority Assistant Whip Kirk Cullimore says whether that means an increase in property or sales tax is yet to be determined.
The details will affect your income. Listen this week, Eye on the Hill 2024. We'll have you covered.
On KSL News Radio.
It's game time, and you're in the locker room ready to take the field. Suddenly, you notice a player you don't recognize. He's wearing your team's jersey, and he even knows your name, but you've never seen him before until now. Would you trust this stranger with your team's playbook? Because that's exactly how phishing scams work. The first quarter of 2022 saw the highest volume of phishing attacks ever recorded. Protect your business with the Les Olson Security Suite from Les Olson IT. Learn more about it at lesolson.com.
Jeff Kaplan here for my good friends at Advanced Window Products. Jake Weber and Nate Orchard are spreading the holiday cheer with their biggest sale of the year. If the wind whistles through your windows, if you want a fresh new look for your number one investment, your home, call Advanced Window Products and take advantage of this incredible end-of-year sale. Replace all of your windows and frames, and you get $2,500 off. But that's not all. You get a free premium glass upgrade. Insulate your home against the cold with double-pane windows and stylish frames, any style, any color, and they're built custom right here at their headquarters in Salt Lake City for 37 years. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. Plus, an additional $2,500 off and a free premium glass upgrade. You can save now, pay later, so take advantage. Call now, Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Patrick was way behind on his IRS taxes.
I was in way over my head. The total amount ended up being somewhere just over $30,000. $30,000.
Then the IRS came to collect.
Started getting letter after letter. A lien had been filed against me. They were going to basically hang me completely out to dry.
He had to do something.
That's when I reached out to Optima Tax Relief.
Patrick's life quickly got a lot easier.
It was very easy, pretty much hands off. They picked up the ball and ran with it.
And how'd it go?
I couldn't believe it. I had to ask 2 or 3 times. I saved an incredible amount of money.
How does Patrick feel about Optima?
Couldn't be happier. They definitely helped me. Optima Tax Relief, the best place to call. They're the best in the business.
Do what Patrick did and call Optima Tax Relief for a free consultation. Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Dave and Dujanovic.
We can have disagreements and still be friends. So often, I think people think that just because we disagree, that we're enemies. That we are not. We're great friends, even though we disagree.
I hope listeners take away something new every day, a new detail they hadn't heard before. And I also hope our show opens their minds to new ideas, new ways of thinking of things.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, it is always a good day when we are joined on the show by Christian Bridgke, of course, a reporter at Reason, covers property rights, housing policy, transportation policy, and regulation in a big way. And this is one of those think again kind of conversations. We've heard a lot about rent controls and housing prices and all those challenges. And Christian, in your piece at Reason.com today, you talked about rent control for the rich, but the rest of you are kind of on your own. Tell us about it.
Yeah, sure. So I recently published a piece based on some documents I received showing tenants in New York's rent stabilization program, which covers about 1 million apartments in New York City, and a couple other communities in the state also have this. And the program, it sets maximum legal rents for units and also governs maximum legal rent increases. And it's intended as a way to provide, affordable and stable housing to New York tenants. And what I learned from these documents I received was that you had a number of tenants who also happen to be quite wealthy themselves and are, in fact, property owners, in a few cases, landlords, and who are benefiting from this program by receiving massively below market rents, even though they can obviously very easily afford, or at least could afford, market rents in New York, given the fact that they're owning, in some cases, $2 million homes in the Hamptons or vacation rental properties that they're renting out for much more than what their rent stabilized apartment goes for.
And so as we look at that, we often talk about making sure that those that are struggling or those, that aren't getting priced out of the market, we know that's a challenge in so many places. But like many programs, there's not the right kind of processes or, in this case, means testing doesn't seem to be part of that equation, so that someone who does have a house in the Hamptons as well as a rent-controlled property in the city, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense in terms of, are we actually helping who we think we're helping, or is this just another example of helping the wealthy and not to paying too much attention to who else it impacts?
Right, for sure. Yeah. So you're right. What these people are doing is, to be clear, is totally legal, and it's totally above board as far as the rules of the program. There's no requirement under New York's rent stabilization law that you make, unlike a lot of other affordability programs, there's no requirement that you make under a certain level of income in order to benefit from it. Anyone, including millionaires, can benefit from a rent-stabilized apartment. And yeah, I think in general, I should say I'm not in favor of rent control or rent stabilization. I think it's a bad way to approach affordability. But I think the best case for it is that, while it might reduce housing supply or reduce housing quality, it still provides stability for people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford market rents. But when you have a program that isn't even means tested, it really is just a free gift to wealthy people who could easily afford housing all on their own. And it creates some knock-on problems. Rent stabilization creates these problems generally, but it's even more egregious when people could afford housing on their own. New York's rent-stabilized housing is generally of poor quality and declining quality because the owners can't raise rents enough to cover repairs, needed maintenance. An increasing number of these units are vacant. An increasing number of these buildings aren't making enough from rent to cover their operating expenses, let alone make a profit. And so you have a situation where these buildings the landlords there, they like to call it, their buildings are being defunded, is what they like to say. And that's a serious situation, and it's made all the worse by the fact that a lot of people who are getting these below market rents, who are, staying in a unit, below market rates and even below cost, are people who could afford housing all on their own.
Yeah, so fascinating. And you pointed out in the piece a number of different places across the country that are seeing, again, kind of the regulatory schemes that don't seem to be having the right result in all of that. Give us a sense of some of the other areas that you're watching. But then I want to come back to this whole idea in terms of what is the better way to go at this in terms of affordability, sustainability when it comes to housing.
So, even as New York struggles with its issues when it comes to rent control, you have a lot of other places around the country, a lot of cities recently, and now that state legislatures are starting up, states as well are introducing bills that would liberalize zoning laws to allow, developers to come in and build more housing than what's currently allowed by the current code. I think that's a much better way of trying to improve housing affordability. You expand supply, prices go down, and you also don't run into these issues of home prices, rents not being high enough to cover maintenance and expenses on depreciating buildings. So I think that's a far better approach.
Yeah, definitely. And so as we try to move it all forward, what are you keeping your eye on as it relates to this in the next little bit? Obviously, during election year, always interesting to see how that impacts the state level, the local level in these kinds of conversations. Anything you're keeping your eye on there?
Oh, yeah, sure. So it's going to be a big year for housing policy. Hard to know exactly what to talk about. But in New York specifically, actually, I think the big thing as it pertains to rent control is there's talk that the legislature, again, will consider something called a good cause eviction bill, which is basically a rent control by other means. It would allow tenants, again, of all incomes to basically drag their landlords into court over any rent increase. And it would the last year's version of the bill basically prevented landlords. It said that any rent increase above 3% or 150% of inflation was per se unreasonable, and a landlord would have to prove in court that it was in fact reasonable for them to raise the rent over 3%. So it sounds like that's going to be an issue again in the legislature this year, so something to keep an eye on.
All right. Great stuff. As always, again, always fascinating to see where regulation goes, where things that are supposed to be helping some people end up helping others, and sometimes just not knowing what's happening creates more confusion than clarity, and it doesn't help the market or those that we're actually trying to help. So fascinating to look at all of that. As always, appreciate Christian Bridgke joining us from Reason. You can check out his piece at Reason.com. Christian, Happy New Year to you, and we look forward to having you back on the show real soon.
Thanks. Happy New Year.
That rounds it out for Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something today that makes a difference.